Hello everyone, welcome to today's monthly meetup from Pune Tech Community. Let's see what Pune Tech Community is. We are basically an online and in-person tech lover group. We are community for enthusiasts who are interested in Microsoft technology. Uh, our objective is basically to improve collaboration, productivity, knowledge sharing, and give a platform for the community contributors to conduct various events, share their knowledge here. And we do conduct many of the events as a part of our initiatives. These are some of the social handles through which you would be able to connect with us. Nanddeep would be sharing the links on the chat. Please follow us on the LinkedIn and on the Meetup group if you are not already part of the Meetup group. Uh, so this is Puneti community organizers. Starting with Nanddeep, myself Siddharth, we have Smita, Kunj, Amay. So this is a group of organizers through which we are able to collaborate and uh, basically conduct such kind of events at Pune Tech community. Today, this is our first monthly meetup. So what we are going to do is we have planned a monthly meetup every month from Pune Tech Community, where we'll be conducting probably 2 hours or 3 hours of sessions from various community speakers. There would be diversity in terms of different topics which we would be covering and everything. So this is going to be a regular meetup, a short meetup, which would be generally conducted on the weekends, more or less every set on Saturday. We are yet to finalize the specific date or something, but it would be most of them would be like at the end of the month. So feel free to join the Pune Tech Community Group, and you would be notified about all the events which are scheduled as a part of our meetup. So today, as we said, what we are trying to do is we are going to basically deep dive into custom connectors. So it would be uh, starting from what custom connector is about, the overviews of custom connectors, and then we would be seeing some demos on how to create custom connectors. Then we would be seeing concept of triggers in the custom connectors and how to use triggers in the custom connectors. And at the end, we would be covering a concept called policies in the custom connectors, through which we would be able to apply different policies for the custom connectors which would be created. I'll start with overview of the custom connector today. So before I start, a little bit of introduction about myself. I'm Siddharth Vaghasia, and I'm a Microsoft MVP and an active PNP community contributor. These are some of the social handles through which you would be able to connect with me. So let's start. What are connectors, right? So basically, we all know as in Power Platform, consider it Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, and Logic Apps. What we generally do is it's basically a platform which allows us to display data from the underlying data source. It allows us to update data to the data source, and there are different kinds of data source which are supported, through which we would be able to connect and able to perform crude operations on the data source, right? Now, how this is possible, we some of us would already know. All of this is possible via connectors, right? So connectors in Power Platform is more or less a proxy or a wrapper, which basically allows us to connect to an external web services, which we can also call it as API, which interacts with this all kind of platform which we have. So once you are using a connectors in a Power Automate, in a Power Apps, or in Azure Logic Apps, basically we are actually connecting to a web service or API through which we would be able to perform different operations. Because it's a low-code platform solution, it means there should be any technology which we take, or any framework which we take, there would be one way or another uh, possibility of allowing us to connect to APIs or web service, right? So we can call it connectors as a similar setup in low code platform in the Power Platform, which will allow us to basically connect to the data source, and then use that connections in the pre-built actions and triggers which are available, through which we would be able to perform different operations. Now, as I said, why do we need connectors, right? Like for example, consider a there are many cloud services and products which are already available, which are always trying to solve a specific problem or use case, right? Any product which we see will not be covering everything which we need. Okay, they would be trying to fix on a specific problem. It would be solving a specific use case, or it would be basically be a product around which would allow us to do something very specific, and they would be specializing in that kind of solutions, right? Now, uh, most of the times it would be always necessary, or it would where there would be situations wherein this integration between different products would be required, right? and uh, and this is because every product which would be there would be they won't be created on a single technology stack. They would have their own underlying technology stack. Some might be created in .NET, some might be created in Java, PHP, Python, etc. So there should be a way in which this technology should be able to interact with each other, right? And that's where API comes into picture, or web service comes into picture. It is one form of a software development code through which different technology stacks would be able to connect with each other, because that understands that HTTP protocols, which is common standard and specification, which more or less all technology stack would be able to support. Now, uh, 1 minute, I can see somebody. Okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So now, and whenever we are also trying to build an application or a project or a specific requirement, there would be many a times wherein we would need a way to interact between the external services, applications, and products, where we have to pass data in and out of it, right? So that is why we need connectors. So when we are building an apps in the Power Apps, or when we are trying to automate a workflow using Power Automate, we would definitely be need to should have a way to connect to these data sources and get data from it. And so that is why we need connectors. There are around 325 plus connectors which are pre-built connectors already available. Many of us would already be aware, and we would be already using this. And if you see, some of the connectors are uh, from Microsoft, and what they would be doing is they would be providing us this connectors through which we would be able to connect to the products within Microsoft 365 technology stacks, right? Like Outlook, you can say SharePoint, Dataverse, OneDrive for Business, Microsoft Form, Planners, Microsoft Team, Outlook. All of them are most of the products which are available as a part of Microsoft 365 technology stacks. Through using connectors, we are able to connect to them, get the data, update the data, and there are actions and triggers which are available, right? And outside of that Microsoft technology stack, there are also the external vendors or products which are more popular, uh, where which we probably might be using in our day-to-day life. Connectors for that products and everything are also available. Like for example, Google Calendar, Gmail, Twitter. Then there is Google Drive. Then there is SFTP, FTP file system through which we would be able to upload files to a particular SFTP or FTP. Then there is Dropbox, Trello. There are around 325 plus pre-built connectors which are available, and this keeps on growing because there is an initiative from Microsoft where people like us who can basically publish and connector into Microsoft Store from the Power Apps Power Automate as a part of our independent publishers. So more or less daily, I would not say daily, but every weekly or bi-weekly, so many of the connectors are getting available. And if you think there is an API which is available and you would be able to use that API, you can create your own custom connectors and you can publish it, and it would be available like it is being available to all of the users cross tenant, right? When we would create custom connectors for specific tenant, it can be only used in that specific tenant. But if you publish it to Microsoft, it would be available for all the users across the tenants, like the way we are using a pre-built custom connector. So let's just see an architectural runtime flow, how all of this thing is happening. So this is a diagram which I got from the Microsoft official documentation of the custom connectors. More or less what they have is basically to support different kinds of connectors, and to basically make the API calls to the actual web services from the platform which we have. They have their own, Microsoft has their own app service API, which basically act as a proxy to make the actual API calls, right? And now to support all this, once we create a connectors, what we would be giving is we would be defining certain files as a part of our Swagger and policies, through which they would know that this particular connectors, these are the endpoint URLs, this is the request object, this is the response object, and everything, and they store it as a part of their credentials and metadata store. And whenever the call is being made, the actual call is being made to the from the Power Apps or Power Automate, it's made to a particular API which Microsoft has created itself, and then internally that is getting called to the actual API, through which the data would come, and then it would be passed to the Power Apps and Power Automate, right? And in this way, it also supports the on-premises gateway. It means if you have your API which is hosted on your on-premises environment, using the same concept of on-premises gateway, which is very popular on how we would be able to get data from our on-premises databases, which is hosted and not in the cloud, we would be able to actually make the API calls or to the APIs which are hosted for on-premises. Right. So this is just an good example of how this overlying how this underlying architecture is there and how all of this is possible. Right. I'll just wanted to add one thing. If you want to just deep dive a little bit into this, whenever you browse Power Apps in the browser, and if you can use the developer tools in the by using F12, and if you see the network tab and you just refresh the Power Apps, which is probably either connecting to one of the data source like SharePoint or Excel or anything, you would see that it is not actually directly making call to SharePoint REST API or Excel REST API or Graph API, right? Because most of the all of the pre-built connectors under Microsoft 365 technology stack would be using the Graph API to get data from it, right? But when you are doing it from the Power Apps, it is not actually making the API call directly to the Graph API, but it would, if you would see, you would notice that there is a particular API request which would be made, which would end with /invoke. It means there would be something depending on the region, and /API/invoke. So all of the calls which are being made from the connectors or using the connections would always go to that invoke method, invoke API. And in that invoke API, if you see the request object, you will find there is a request URL where all these parameters where we have to connect, like for example, a particular site collection, a particular table or a list in the site collections, all of this would have been configured and through which it would have been set it up there. Now, let's come to what are the custom connectors, right? So basically, custom connectors is an ability for us to create our own connectors. Okay, it's more or less definition files with schema wherein we would be defining actions, triggers, policies, and details about what are the endpoints which are available as a part of actions, whether it is a get method, put method, a merge method, what kind of method, HTTP method it is, and we then give that, okay, in the request object we have to pass this particular body, or we have to pass it as a part of a query string, or and what we will get as in response, right? So we define all of this particular thing in a file called Swagger file, which is basically a definition file written as in YAML, and we don't have to write it manually. There are different ways to do it, which we will see, but more or less by just defining all of this, we create a custom connectors. And as soon as we create these custom connectors and in a particular tenant, depending on what we have defined as an actions and triggers, we would be able to use that particular custom connectors in our Power Apps and Power Automate, the way we are using a pre-built connectors, right? So what we do generally is we go to Power Apps or Power Automate, we go to data source, we create new connections, we give if the connection is authenticated or protected via some particular authentication methods, we select it, we do the authentication, and we use the actions which are available, and that connections will then be reused across, can be reused across different actions and triggers which is available. So here also same concept, we would be able to do it. We just have to define our custom connectors as in part of our definition or while we are creating it, and then rest would be taken care by Microsoft. Now, what are the different components? As I said, basic information, name of your connectors, description of your connectors, if you want to provide logo of your connectors, kind of thing. Then you would define the actions. Actions are the sets which would be used in the Power Apps. Sorry, not in the Power Apps, in the Power Apps also, but also in the Power Automate, right? Now, actions are nothing but actual API calls which would be made. It means actions would always respond to a particular trigger, right? So it can be a trigger wherein in the Power Apps itself, we would have said that, okay, I need to use a connector called Office 365 users dot search method. Now, dot search is basically nothing but and actions which is already defined as a part of that custom connectors through which we would be able to pass different parameters whom we wanted to search, and in return it will give us the response in form of either tables or collections depending on what kind of request it is, right? Similar way, actions in the Power Automate is what we do, which once we have the trigger point defined, the next step which we do is we basically define an action where we would be able to choose what actions we wanted to perform, right? Then there is triggers. Trigger is basically it is not supported in Power Apps. Triggers would be always in the Power Automate. There are different kinds of triggers which are available in Power Automate. So if you want to if you have a custom connector where you also have to define your own triggers, you can definitely do that. Plus, every connectors which we are using as in pre-built connectors, we would see that for that particular category of connectors, there would be triggers and actions which are defined, right? So whenever we are creating new flow and we say that, okay, we wanted to have an automated trigger flow, it means it will allow us to select a particular trigger which we can use across the different connectors which are available. Then there is reference. References are more or less variables which we can kind of reuse between the actions and triggers. So if you need something which is common between actions and triggers, we can use references to use that across actions. And it is more like a schema of a particular object type, which we would be probably reusing in actions and triggers, which can be, when as the name suggests, it can be reference between the actions and triggers, and you can have your own definition of the reference variables or the object type within your custom connectors. And then there is policies. Policies are basically certain generic rules which you can apply. We will go into details in the policy in the same session, but on a high level, it's more or less, if you wanted to apply some policies, like if you wanted to apply a custom header to every API call which is being made from these custom connectors, you can create a policy. You might want to pass a custom header, or you wanted to pass a generic headers or other things in all the actions. When the API is being moved, you have to create policies. Now, why do we want to use custom connectors? Okay, the base thing is there are 325 plus connectors which are available, but in the real world scenario, no matter how many connectors or connections are available, there would be a business requirement where it won't suffice, and we would find that, okay, that particular requirement which we have doesn't have a pre-built connectors available with us, right? So it means that we would have to create our own custom connectors, right? What if you wanted to integrate with your custom API? It means if you might be working on a Fusion development team wherein there would be an API development team which would be basically would have created API on its own. Okay, they might be doing certain operations very specific to what you want. Okay, you might have Azure functions or Azure API or any API which is basically a REST-based API which would have been created, and you wanted to integrate into your Power Apps Power Platform. At that time, we would have to use custom connectors. Now, if the other reason of using the custom connector is that you want to integrate it with third-party APIs and product, it means these third-party API products are available. They do have their own set of web services and APIs are available, but you want to find a way, or as per your business requirement, there is a case wherein you would have to get data or update data into these third-party APIs and products, and for that you might want to create a custom connectors. And then the last reason being you want to extend the existing connectors, right? Because there also might be situations wherein though you have all of the within Microsoft 365 itself or within a product which pre-built product which we have, right, for connectors which is available, they might have not exposed all the endpoints which are there in their products or API. They might have found a most popular ones which they feel that there would be the most common use cases which would be there probably to use, and they would have just created actions and triggers for that particular thing. But if you think that you need something more than that, API is available, but the actions or trigger is not available, right? In that case, also we might want to create it as an extend the pre-built connectors as in custom connectors. Now, one of the, some people might be already doing this. There is an alternative to custom connectors where we can directly make HTTP request from the Power Automate, right? Then why and how how we differentiate what do we want to do when whether we want to make HTTP request from the Power Automate not. First thing is with custom connectors, what we get is the reusability, right? It means if you think that you have multiple Power Apps or Power Automate, which is basically might want to use that particular API or make that particular API call across the apps within your tenant, then it gives a sense of reusability because custom connectors can be once created, it can be reused across all the Power Apps and Power Automate and Logic apps, right? But if you are making an HTTP request from the Power Automate, there is no reusability. It means that every specific use case or Power Apps which you build, what we basically would have to do is uh, we can use it in the Power Automate. And the other thing is that HTTP request cannot be made from the Power Apps. It means we cannot directly make an HTTP request from the Power Apps. There is no methods or technique available to make the HTTP request from the Power Apps. So what we would have to do is we would have to call Power Automate from the Power Apps, and Power Automate would be making an HTTP request, and then it probably might process the response and then send it back to the Power Apps. Okay, so there is an overhead of calling this, like this thing. And plus, if we think that reusability is something which we would have to do, definitely we can go with the custom connectors. Okay. So moving on, what kind of APIs are supported? So any RESTful APIs are supported. It means your API, if it is based on the RESTful protocols and the guidelines and the policies, it is supported in the to be created as a custom connector, right? Any third party, as I said, any third party public APIs, any products vendors which is basically having the APIs on their own, which is a RESTful based API, we would be able to create or connect using the custom connectors. Then your custom APIs, like if you would have created APIs using Azure functions, you would have created APIs which are Azure APIs. It means probably a .NET Core API or anything which is hosted as in on the Azure as in app service. We can use that to create custom connectors, or it can be any APIs hosted anywhere. Okay, probably be it in A2 hosting or any other hosting which is available. It doesn't matter, or a technology stack also doesn't matter. It's just that it should be a RESTful based API, and if it is that, it means we would be able to do it. And again, as I said, we should be also able to connect to the private APIs which are hosted on your on premises servers and somewhere, okay, using on premises gateway technique. Now, the supported authentication method, okay, any API which would be there, right? It always won't be, it would be always more or less protected with some of the authentication method. So currently custom connector is supporting generic OAuth 2.0, which is very common and very secured, I would say, way to basically secure your APIs. Okay, so that is been available, which basically uses the mechanism of getting the token, and then on every request we would be passing that token to make the actual API calls. The first thing we would be doing is make the connection, get the token, use that token to make any API calls further than that. So that is been supported here, and it takes custom connectors once we create it from the way we would be creating. It basically supports the auth, and underlyingly it will take care of basically making the API call to get the token and using that token to make the actual API call which we need done. And all of this is done via connection. So if you remember, any connectors which we are using, which is basically protected, right? Uh, uh, if there is a no connection available within your account or by the developers, which is not shared for that particular action, it allows us to, it asks us to basically create a connection, which would be a sign in button. And on click of sign in button, we basically log in, we give the consent depending on what that action, specific action is doing. We give the consent and everything, and then the connection is been made, and then we can use that connection on all the further actions which are available in that particular pre-built connector, or it can be in the custom connector also. The second authentication method which is supported is the basic authentication, which is not more secure, but there are some APIs and products which are available which are still in the old or legacy way of protecting their APIs using username and password. So that is also supported. So in this case, when you click on sign in button, you will just get an username and password text box which you just enter. It gets validated across by that particular product or vendor, and if the username and password is correct, the connection would be made successfully. And then there is an API key based authentication, which is very simple and again not secured, but every API would be protected with a unique key. It means if you have that unique key, you would be able to make that call, right? And so this is also supported. And for sure, if your APIs are not protected and it's a public API which doesn't require any sort of authentication, that is also supported to be used in our custom connector. We would be looking at this in our demo once Kunj would cover this, the different techniques and how all of this works. Right. Now, what you need, once you want to create a custom connectors, what you would need is basically an API details, nothing more than that, right? And within the API details, what you would need, what is your endpoint URL, what that endpoint URL, what is the HTTP method for that endpoint URL, whether it is a get, post, put, merge, delete. What is the request and response format? It means what you need to pass, what you would be getting back. In fact, what you would be getting back is also not that important, but it's important if you wanted to make uh, and actions within your connectors, which basically would be able to automatically parse and know that what I have to expect as a part of my response. And then it can be used in our dynamic content once we are selecting it. Because if it knows that this is what I'm going to get, it basically allows us to get and set the dynamic content with the properties and attributes available as a part of that JSON object or as a part of that array. And you need to know the authentication method, like how it is been protected, how authentication mechanism work that for that particular API. So this is the base thing which would be needed for you to get started creating the custom connectors, right? Now, how will you get this information? There are different ways depending on what APIs are you trying to connect. There, if you are trying to connect to a product which is already available, definitely that product owners or the product company would have their own API documentation. There are times wherein they would Swagger is a basic most used way of defining or creating documentation for your APIs which are being hosted somewhere. So they might also have the Swagger file or a documentation about the Swagger file somewhere. If we have that, that also can be used for us to get the basic information like the API details and everything. If they don't have any documentation or anything, we can always get it from the developer who has developed that custom API, saying that, okay, what are the endpoints which is available, what request I have to make, what response I would be getting. All of the information the developer would know, okay, and they would be able to give this information. And sometimes, as we know, Postman is most popular product for us to allow testing the APIs which are available. What the product owners or the product companies would have given is they would have created one reusable Postman collection, and they would have uploaded it somewhere wherein once you import in your Postman tool, you would be able to see all the endpoints, you would be able to see all the definition, you would be able to see all the request format, response format, etc. Being already set up, so that we know that, okay, this is what I have to pass, this is what I would be getting, etc. And then that Postman collection also can be used to create a custom connector. Okay. Now, different ways to create custom connectors. First thing is we can create from the Azure service. It means if you would have used Azure function or Azure app service to host your this thing, from the portal Azure also you get an option from where you would directly able to say that, okay, I wanted to create custom connectors out of it, and it will automatically kind of get what APIs are available and everything. You would be able to connect to that particular Azure app service and create a custom connectors directly from there. Then you can import it from an open file, open API definition. So open API definition is basically a standard definition across, again, a kind of a standard guidelines or which every API product owners, the product companies would be using this for creating the open to define their own endpoints, URL and everything, right? So now what we do is generally this file can be given as a file or it can be given as in URL from which you would be able to get it. And then we can also import, as I said, import it from the Postman collection. And import it from the GitHub. This is very interesting, and you should know that this is a way for us to extend the pre-built connectors, right? Because as I said, Microsoft has provided a way for us to also publish the custom connectors, which can be used across the tenant, which can be published as a part of connectors, right? So they have a GitHub repo wherein all the pre-built authorized, verified, certified connectors which are available, which has been created and which we are able to use. And it says it's on definition file, property file. There are three files which would be needed, and we can use that. When we say import it from GitHub, it allows us to basically choose the branch from that particular GitHub repo, and then within that particular branch, whatever existing pre-built connectors are available, we would be able to use that to extend it. It means by default it will give us all the actions and everything, and then we would be able to modify according to our need, and then change it or extend it for this thing. So these are the different ways, and if nothing at all, you can do it from the scratch. Okay. Now with this, I'll just wanted to give you reference from a video from the April Dunman. She has explained same thing, from a zero to hero series on the Power Platform connector, through which I have taken some of the content, and these are the other Microsoft official documentation through which you would be able to go and see and deep dive into understanding of the custom connectors and everything. And now, in terms of demo, Kunj would be covering different authentication methods through which we can use as a part of creating custom connectors, how to create a custom connector using from the blank, between says from the scratch, using open API documentation for the custom connectors, using Postman collections, and how to use that in Power Apps and Power Automate. Okay, so hope this sessions gives you a basic idea on why, what, and how of the custom connectors, why we would be using it, for us to understand in which situation we should go with the custom connectors, or we can directly make an HTTP request call. And also it opens the possibilities on that we just are not limited to using the pre-built connectors which are available in the Power Platform. If there is APIs and if there is web services available from where you wanted to get and update data, definitely we would be able to extend it, right? So with it, I'll hand over to Kunj for giving us some cool demos on how to do this. Kunj, over to you.
Thank you, Siddharth. And thank you everyone for joining the session on Saturday. So let me quickly share my screen and okay. So the first question which comes to our mind is from where can we create the custom connector? So to create the custom connector, there are two placeholders. So first is we can go to Power Apps and the second is we can go to Power Automate as well. So in both the cases, if you see, we have something called as data. So this is not updated. It would be Dataverse in like the new environment. So inside this section, there is something called as custom connector. So from here, we can create our custom connector. The same situation is in Power Automate as well. So if you go inside the data section, we have something called as custom connector. Okay. So when I click on custom connector, we get multiple options. So if you see, we get a new custom connector option where if I click on this new custom connector, we get a drop down which Siddharth explained that we can create it from the blank. We can create it from Azure service. We can have all these different options. So in today's demo, first demo, what we are going to see is I created a custom API, which is Azure AD authenticated. So it is using OAuth 2.0 to authenticate, and we are using Azure AD based authentication. So let me quickly start my API. So this is simple API. It's a values API. So first thing to note over here is whenever you see this localhost API, because it is only hosted in my local system, Power Apps and Power Automate cannot access it because it's not internet facing. So to make this internet facing for just today's demo purposes, we are using ngrok. And what I'll do is I'll host this API into internet so that everyone can access it. Okay. So now what I can do is I can copy this URL, and if I paste it over here, and we can see the app up and running. So this is hosting our API. We can even host it in our Azure or any other way, but this is just for the testing purposes. So if you want to test your custom API which is created, you can test it. Now let me open my Postman, and just to show you that if you just hit the API without providing any authentication, it would provide you an unauthorized access. Okay. So because it's an authenticated API using Azure AD Authentication. So let me quickly update the URL. And if I open and if I send, so now if you see, let me provide API values. Now if you see, we are getting 401 unauthorized because it requires authentication. So which is a bearer token. It requires a bearer token to authenticate this. We need to pass an token to get the API up and running. So for that, what I've done is in Postman, there is something called as OAuth 2.0, where we pass our authentication in the request header format. And I have predefined few of the things. So to to authenticate your API, there are few things which you need to do. You need to create an Azure AD application. You can, so this is the client ID which you get. You can create a client secret. There are few scopes which are required, and that is how you can authorize your application. So now to use this API into our custom connector, what we can do is, first of all, we need to create a Azure AD application. Okay, so for that, what I'll do is I'll go to my Azure AD application, Azure Active Directory. I'll go to app registration. I'll create a new app registration. So this is a blank app registration which I'm creating. We can give custom connector demo. And for now, we'll keep this redirect URI as blank, and I'll register this. So once I register, I'll get something called as client ID. I can copy this and keep it with me. We'll use this in our further application. And now I'll create a client secret as well. So you can even use certificate based authentication, that is up to us. But for current situation, we'll use client secret based authentication. Now I have created a custom API. Now to give the access to this custom API, I need to provide the permission. So that permission I can give it from add permission and APIs my organization use. So I have hosted an API called as Azure AD Authenticated API Custom Connector. So this is the client ID which I'm using in my code. So if you see over here, I am using that client ID to authenticate my API. I'm giving this permission. Once this permission is given, now I can go to Power App. Let us create a custom connector from blank. Let me give demo custom connector from blank. So if you see, we are presented with multiple information. Like first of all, you can upload a custom connector icon. So for now, let me select the custom connector icon. And then we can even provide the background color. So we'll give white. We can provide a short description. So this is an custom connector from blank. So if you're using on-premises gateway, you can select this and then you will be able to connect to the API via on-premises gateway. But for now, we are not using on-premises gateway. Now, if you see, we have schemas. We can even call an HTTP API or we can call an HTTPS API. So for time being, we have an HTTPS API. So we'll provide the host name. So host name is nothing but the domain name. So this is my domain name and I'll copy this and paste it over here. So base URL, you can provide slash or you can even provide slash API. Uh, slash API would be helpful if you have all the APIs which starts from slash API. So you do not need to write slash API every time. Okay, now is the important part. So this is where we define the authentication type. So there are multiple authentication type which are available: no authentication, basic auth, API key, and OAuth. But for our custom API which we created, it is using OAuth 2.0. So we'll select OAuth 2.0. Now, if you see over here in the identity provider, there are multiple identity providers which are available. You can have Salesforce, you can have Google, GitHub, Facebook. So there are multiple open API, OAuth 2.0 providers which are available. For now, we are using Azure Active Directory for our custom API. We'll select Azure Active Directory. Now we need to provide the client ID. So the client ID which we created, we'll copy that, paste it over here. We'll select client secret, paste it over here. Now, if you see, there is something called as tenant ID. So this tenant ID would be common if you have your API. So if I go to authentication part, here if you see, it is selected as account in the organizational directory only. So only my tenant can use this API. If I want this to be across all the tenant, I can select multi-tenant. So if it is a multi-tenant, you can select common. If it is single tenant, better to give your tenant ID. So let me provide my tenant ID. So tenant ID is something you can get it from overview. There is something called as tenant ID. Copy it, paste it in the tenant ID. The important part over here is resource URL. Okay, so resource URL is when you host any API. So if I go to the API permissions which I've given, and if I click on this, this is this is what makes us the complete one is a scope, but for the resource URL, we'll only use till this. So I'll explain you this in detail as well. So we'll select this resource URL. For the scope, we'll give the complete value and we'll create the connector. So once we create the connector, there is something called as redirect URL. So currently it is not populated, but once we create the custom connector, we'll get a redirect URL. So till the time it is getting created, I'll explain you a little bit about how my API is authenticated. So for even for authenticating the API, there is a Azure Active Directory application which is created. So I'll quickly show you that. I go to all API. This is the Azure Active Directory API which is created. And to have a custom API authenticated, there is something called as expose an API. You need to expose the API. So this is the thing which we used in this in our Power App custom connector. Okay. So now if I go back to my Power Apps, and if I see, we get a redirect URL. So I need to copy this redirect URL and paste it in my authentication section of the Azure Active Directory which I created. So I'll click add a platform. I'll go to web. I'll enter the redirect URI and I'll configure. I'll select the access token ID token and I'll configure it. So what happens is our custom connector has a endpoint and we get the token from this endpoint. So it would be redirect slash code equals to or token equals to, and that token would be used by our custom API. So this is how our custom connector would get the Azure AD bearer token. Now, once everything is done, we can go ahead and set the definition. So here is where we get the actions, reference, and policies part. For now, we'll only add it as an action because of this action, we can use it in our Power Apps and Power Automate. Okay, so I'll create a new action. So to create a new action, we need to provide few things called as summary, description, and operation ID. Operation ID should be unique across your custom connector. So for now, we'll just provide some values like get values information. This API provides the value. We can give the same value. This should be unique. Now for the visibility part. So this is very important. Whenever you, so let me go to the learn more part and explain you this. So if you see over here, uh, we have multiple options called as none, advanced, internal, and important. So visibility none indicates that whenever you create the uh, action out of this custom connector, how do you want to see all the options which are visible? Do you want to see all the options? Whether it is very important for you to display all the options, whether it is not important for you, whether you want it to be advanced. So based on, so advanced is you click on this show advanced options and it would show you other options which are available. If you want to be only internal and do not expose it to any like custom connector which are used in the Power Apps or Power Automate, you use it as an internal. And if you want to show all the options, you select is a important. For now, we can select any of the option because it's not important. Now, to add the action, we have something called as request. We can import from a sample. So what we can do is this is the endpoint which we are using. It is a get API. I'll copy this. You see over here, this is verb. So these are all the verbs which we can use: get, delete, post, put, head, options, patch. So you can even add an options API. And then once the options API is executed, you can call your get API. So in many of times you want first options to be called and then the get. So you can even have an options API as well. Verb. So for now, we'll select get. We'll give the endpoint. We'll just import this, and we can even provide the response as well. So there are multiple parameters, like we can provide question if there is any path which we want to provide, we can provide. If there is any query, like we have ID equals to 123, we can even provide that. We can even add custom headers as well, and we can have a body. If it is a post method, we can have a body as well. But it, because it's a get method, it's only a simple API which we have created, and we can even import the response. This is important just to get the just to explain our custom connector what kind of data he is expecting. So for now it's only a simple array of values. So we'll copy this, paste it over here. If there is any custom headers which you are expecting from the API out of it and you want to use that custom headers, so you can provide this custom response header as well. So you can just import this. Once it is imported, everything is succeeded. So next section is called as code preview. So let's say for example, we want to customize our response once we receive it. So here we can specify all a custom code, but for current demo, we will not use code based customization. We can tweak our input, we can tweak our output, whatever we want to do, we can do it over here using a C sharp based code. Okay, so your code must be in C sharp and have a maximum execution time of 5 seconds is what is required, and the code should not be more than 1 MB. So this is the condition for using this code. For now we'll disable it, it is not used. And what we'll do is we'll go to the last part called as test. So to test this connector, first we need to have a connection, because once we get the connection, we'll get the token out of it, and then we can call all the APIs which are all the actions which are inside this custom connector. So first let us click on new connection. It would ask, I'll click on create. A pop-up appears and it would ask me for my account. I'll select my account and see, this is where we can give the consent. So if you have seen any kind of oath authentication, in any oath authentication, you need to provide some consent. If you want to provide the consent for your organization so that no other user would have this pop-up, you can provide the consent on behalf of your organization. Or else if you want all the users to have this pop-up once, then you can just select uncheck it and accept it. For now, let us select it and accept it. Once your connection is established, you would be redirected to this connection section. On the left hand side, there is something called as connection section. This is where we go again to our custom connector, go back to our pre-demo, go back to our demo, We edit this. From the drop down, we'll go back to test. And okay, there is something which I have not saved. Let me go to definition. I have not saved the definition. So let me quickly update the values. We can select import from the sample. Okay. So every time if you do some changes, please update the connector. This would happen if you are not updating the connector. And once it is done, update the connector. Once your connector is updated, now if I'll go to the testing part, I would be able to test my API. Okay, let me go to the test part. And now there is something called as test operation. If I click on this, see, I get a response as 200 and I get the body values as well. Okay, so now if I update my API, if I want to update it and have some different value, let's say for example, I'll update a value called as value 6. I'll stop and I'll rerun. Now, if I see and if I execute my custom connector in the test environment itself, let me test the operation again. So what internally is happening is we'll get these values. So our custom connector is first getting an bearer token, and then this bearer token is passed in the headers to this API, and then only once it is authenticated, we'll be able to get values for this API. Okay. Now to test this API into our Power App, let us go and create a sample Power App. Let us go to Power Apps. I'll create a canvas. We can select table phone, tablet phone, anything. Demo custom connector. We'll just create a simple Power Apps, no fancy UI. We'll skip everything. So first thing what you need to do is you need to go to your data section and add the custom connector which you created in the data. So what I can do is I can click on demo custom connector which we created. So please note that this is a premium connector. Okay, whenever you use this into your Power Apps, it's a premium connector. You need to have that proper license. Selecting this, I'll select this. Once it is added, what I'll do is I'll quickly add a small button and call it as call custom API, call custom API using connector. So please mind my UI skills. I'm not good at it. So, and then we'll add a table to view the data. Okay, we'll add a table. We'll just add the table. Okay, now what we'll do is we'll just add the collection. We'll add the data which we get in a collection. So we'll just say it as a values collection. So we'll add clear collect values collection. And then here we can, so if you see over here, once we add our connector, we'll be able to call our custom actions which we created. So the custom action was get. So demo custom connector dot get values information, and that's it. So we can call our get values information and store all the data into our collection, and we'll just add a collection into our table and edit few fields, add fields. So there's only this value which we are adding. Once this is added, I'll run this. Okay. So once I click on this button, our API would be called and we'll be able to see the values over here. So this is how we can call any custom API, and these are all authenticated. So these are all like very authentic. So no one can break this. It is O 2.0 and very helpful. So if you want to have any customization into your API, you can have this. So this is pre-custom built. Okay, and we can use this custom connector into our Power Automate as well. But for that, first of all, let us do one thing. Let us don't save this. Let us go back to our custom connector. And currently we had a demo for the blank. Now what we'll do is we'll have a import from a Postman collection. So what we'll do is this is a get values API which I've saved in our demo custom connector. Let me update this because I've updated the endpoint. Let me save this. Once it is saved, what you can do is you can just export this. Once you export this collection, there are multiple options which you see. Collection V 1.0, collection V 2.0, 2.1. So all these three are available into our import a postman collection. So if you see import a postman collection V1 V1 2.0 and 2.1, even if V1 is deprecated, still they have given us a like availability of V1.0. So now what I'll do is I'll export this. I'll save it in a file. I'll replace it and I'll just import it. So this is the JSON which gets imported. Demo custom connector postman collection. I'll open the file and I'll provide the name demo custom connector using postman. If you don't want to do all this stuff manually, okay, remove few stuff. Let me add again, import the file and click on continue. So once you click on continue, few of the things are auto populated. So if you see, description is auto populated, schema HTTPS was already selected, host is also pre-populated. Few of the things you do not need to select by default, but like icons and all those things are not pre-populated. You can select your own custom icon and you can provide background color if required. And now if you see over here, the security part is also pre-populated, but currently they are not able to understand whether it's a generic or an Azure AD authentication. So they have provided generic by default, but we'll select the Azure Active Directory. We'll just provide the few things which we already had. We'll quickly do this so that we can save some time. Common, we'll update the common to our tenant ID. We'll give the resource URL. Similarly, we'll give the scope and we'll click on create connector. Once we click on create connector, we'll get that redirect URL, which is already populated in our Azure Active Directory application. So we do not require to repopulate it. Now, if I go to the definition part, see, already populated. Because we have used Postman, few of the things are already populated. These are values API, operation ID is populated, the URL is populated, even the response is also populated. We do not require to do anything. We just need to go and test. That's it. So go to test, we create a connection. Because it's a new custom connector, we need to create a connection first. Once the connection is created, we can use this custom connector. So what we'll do is for this demo purpose, we'll use this custom connector into our Power Automate. Okay, so if you see over here, this is created. I'll edit this, first test it just to see that everything is working. Okay, it's working fine. Now, what we'll do is we'll go to Power Automate and we'll create a blank Power Automate. Just for this demo purpose, we'll create an instant cloud flow. We'll select a manual trigger for custom connector. We'll click on create. Now, if you see, we'll get an custom option in our action section, and we would have all the custom connector into our which are used in our tenant. So for this demo, we are using from Postman. Once it is selected, we have values API. If there are any additional things which are available, it would be populated in this other than values API as well. So we'll just save this and we'll test this. Can manually go. So here, if you see, sign in is required. Here is where our sign in happens. If I click on continue, run flow, and done. Now, if I see the values API, get the body as values 4, 5, and 6, which is coming from this API. Okay. So this is how we can use blank and using the Postman collection. Now we'll just have a small demo of how we can use the open API definition, which was previously known as Swagger doc. So I have created a custom API for that as well. Let me quickly open that custom API. So open API definition was previously known as Swagger. It is a simple Swagger document. So I'll quickly show you how the document is. This is a custom API which we created. It's a weather information API. It's an out of the box API which we get when you create a new project. No fancy thing which we are currently using. Till the time it is building, anyone has any doubt till now, we can just have some clarification.
Kunj, one more thing you can show them is the custom connector which you have created. You
Yes,
can use also YAML to edit the Swagger file, like
correct.
how the
So
definition would be for the existing connectors.
perfect. Okay. So let us take this example. So this is a from Postman. Okay. So there is a some section called a Swagger editor. So if I click on this, you will see a document. This is on the left hand side. It's a YAML based file, and this is the Swagger UI. So I'll come to it on a detail part. So if you see, this is an open API which I have created. This is a weather forecast API. And if I go to Swagger endpoint, this is a document which gets created. This is similar to what you see over here. So this is a custom built Swagger document which we have created. And there's only one API. We are just having an open API. It has no authentication, no auth. It just gives us the weather forecast. If I click on try it, I execute, I'll get the values. Okay. So if you see over here, there is something called a swagger.json. So if I click on this, so this is the JSON file which we can import for creating a custom connector via our open API definition. So let me go to custom connector. If I click on import an open API file, I can just provide this Swagger JSON. So let me quickly save this JSON file. This is a Swagger JSON. Let me save it, replace it. Okay. Now, if you see over here, we have something called as, so I'll first show you two options. So there is something called as import an open API file and import an open API from URL. So from URL is nothing but you give this URL. Because it's local hosted, it would not be available. So let me quickly start the ngrok to expose it. 44397. Okay. Now we get this. So we can even call our weather API using this endpoint as well. So if I just provide this slash weather forecast, thing will be able to get, see, this is the data which we get using this API. So if I go to this, if I click on import an open API file, we'll from Swagger. So Swagger is nothing but a previous name of open API. So previously till version 1, it was called as Swagger. From version 2 onwards, it is called as open API. So I'll just import the JSON file, and if I click on continue, we can select an icon. So these are all not pre-populated because I have not mentioned in my Swagger doc. So if you see over here, this is the JSON which we have created. So it has path, what is the endpoint forecast, whether it's a get post, what are the tags, what is the procedure, how we can get it. So these are all the headers, what is the response code, what would be the definition when we get so it would be an array of items with this definition. So all this stuff would come into my custom connector. I'll just quickly provide the host which we have. Let me quickly copy this to security. For the security part, we have no authentication, so no authentication. And if you go to the definition part, see, a reference is already added. So if I go to the reference, see, we have already a weather forecast API which is already added over here, and it also has a response. So no operation ID summary because we have not mentioned it over here. So let me quickly update that. This you do not get it in the Swagger doc. We need to update it manually. Okay, once you update this, we can go to create connector. And now I'll show you what Siddharth was mentioning. So if you go to the Swagger editor, once the connector is created, hmm, see, if you keep both the things side by side, the JSON, the UI which we have, and the Power Apps Swagger editor. See, so this is weather API, which we have similar to that in our Swagger UI as well. So Swagger API, we have weather API v1, weather API v1, the base URL, the base URL will get. So for this base URL is localhost. So currently it would show localhost and all those things. And the schema is HTTPS. We'll get this weather forecast information. So if there is any authorization, you would have this lock icon. If it is open, you will get this open. So you can even see all the things. What are the different APIs which are available? You can even have multiple APIs, like you can have weather forecast get, you can have weather forecast post as well. You can post the data. So in the same API, you can create multiple actions and you can create multiple references as well. Okay. So in a single custom connector, you can have multiple API calls. So this is nothing but everything what custom connector does understands in an open API definition only, because it's a standard way of understanding an API. So this is how you can get the Swagger information, and we'll just quickly do a demo for this as well. We'll go to code. For now, we are not using any code preview part. So we'll skip this. We'll go to the test part. We'll create a new connection. Every time you create a connection, you come back to this connection part. You need to go back to custom connector. Click on from Swagger, edit this, go to the test section and click on test operation. So this data is coming from our API, which we created. So this is a custom API, but it is an open API. There's no authentication part. Now we can use this API similarly into our Power Apps and Power Automate. So to quickly show, we'll quickly create a blank canvas. Similarly, what we had in our demo part, we can have a demo for this as well. So I'll just explain because this has multiple columns. I'll just create a quick add connection from Swagger. We'll just add the button and the table. We'll just update few properties called API. We'll just update on select, clear collect, and we'll give it as a weather collection. And we'll call our custom API, which is from, what is the name? From weather API. Weather API dot get weather information, and we'll update the weather collection. We'll just edit the fields, add fields. So these are all the fields. Because it is pre-populated, we are able to see all this value. If the response was not added, you would not be able to see. You need to manually do this operation, and hence it is better to just give a simple response. So once you call this API, you get this value. Okay. And to what Siddharth was mentioning, if you want to see, you can inspect. I'm not sure. Okay. We can go to the network tab. I'm not sure if my machine would be able to handle this. Okay, but if you go, like, if you have this network tab, if you see, you will be able to see the invoke which Siddharth was mentioning. So these are all the different types of custom connector and how you can create it. So similarly, you can create the custom connector for the Graph API as well. So in the Graph API, only one thing which you need to change is if you go to this uh, Azure AD application which we created for the custom connector, and in the API permissions where we added our custom API, you just need to add the permission for the Graph API. And in the scope, it would be a delegated permission because you run all the custom connector on behalf of a user. So even if you see the API, custom API which we created, it is having an API which is a delegated API and not an application permission. So all the graph API as well, if you create, you need to have a delegated permission. You can call any graph API and just instead of having that API colon something which we used in the scopes and the different thing, you just need to pass https graph.microsoft.com, the graph API scope. So I'll quickly show you one. If you just add an let me show you. So we already have a user.read. So if you go over here, so this is what you need to use, and this is the scope. So complete is the scope, and this is what you use when you create a custom connector. Okay, any doubt till now? If not, then
Yeah, actually, hi, Sagar here.
yes,
Actually, you already mentioned the Graph API, but
correct.
when you use the Graph API, that time you also need to approval because when you use the in SharePoint, we can use the Graph API. In SPFX, that we need to approval in Admin Center. When you use the Graph API for creating the custom API in Azure, that time also you need to approval to required.
Correct. So let me show you demo for graph. So what happens is the pop-up which you saw, right, Sagar, which comes up,
Yes.
which indicated when you created a new connection for a custom connector, a pop-up came where you can provide the consent on behalf of your organization, or you can provide the consent for yourself, because Power Apps and Power Automate works on a specific user permission only. So even if you see, if I go to this Power Automate and let me edit this, I'll show you. See, here is a connection. So whatever is working based on this user only. So there is no additional permission which are required. The pop-up comes, you need to consent that pop-up. That is it. So in SPFX, because we don't want to see all that thing, there is a different way around. We have that API organization. You go there and you approve that for the Graph API. So this is so no operations are required to do in this custom connector. What we have in
Then
the SPFX.
see, actually, if I not create the my custom API, we directly here the option is available in Power Automate. Create the custom API. We can just provide the Graph API related URL, and we can also provide the authenticated user connection. That time also use, right?
Yes, Sagar. I think if you're directly also making Graph API without your custom API, the because Graph API is also protected using OAuth, you would have to also provide all of this because the default pre-built connectors which are available, which would be using its own app registration, would have only certain level of permission which will be required. So to extend that, what you would be doing is you would be doing something more than that, right? So you have to create an Azure AD app registration, create client ID, client secret, give all the permissions which required as a part of your creating the custom connector using Graph API. Then only that particular custom connector would be able to call this. So still the process would remain same. Still you would have to authenticate, and it would be done based on the delegated permission only. Okay. One thing you have to note here is the custom connector with Graph API will not work with the application permission. It will always work with a delegated permission. It means through the connection account or the user which we have used to create that connection, under that account only the Graph API's calls would be made. Does
Yeah.
that answer your
Right.
question?
Yeah. Thank you.
So if everyone has time, I can just quickly show you how we can use uh, go to Graph Explorer.
Or Kunj, I think we are already 20 minutes over time.
Okay,
We can,
sorry,
yeah, we
but
can
yeah,
take
in
offline.
the next time I'll explain you
Yeah,
this
we
as
can
well.
take it
It's very
offline also.
straightforward. Yeah. Okay, sure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Over
Yeah,
to
Thank
you,
you.
thank you.
Nanddeep.
So I will take over. All right, hope you can see my screen. Okay, great. All right, so
Yes.
let us see like how we can expand the functionality of custom connector with trigger definition. So what is mean by trigger is that something has happened, we want to get notified, and then there is a trigger which will help us notify that something has happened. Probably you can take a next set of action. But okay, before we start, quick introduction. Myself, Nanddeep Nachan. I'm Microsoft MVP for Office Apps and Services, as well as Microsoft Certified Trainer, author of couple of books on SharePoint framework as well as SharePoint hybrid with SharePoint 2019. And onto the right hand side, here are a few of the media handlers through which you will be able to get in touch with me. All right, so we will cover what is meant by triggers, and then how we will be able to use the triggers in custom connectors. And then again, there are two types of triggers when it comes to the execution. So we will see how we can create both webhook trigger as well as the polling trigger. Okay, so basically trigger allows you to extend connector functionality in Microsoft Power Automate as well as in Microsoft Azure Logic Apps. So where a system needs to respond to changes in the underlying data or services, we can use this kind of triggers. So for example, when a record is created or maybe when an email is received, these are kind of triggers that we will be able to use. So again, the Power Automate and Logic Apps define trigger as an event that starts a cloud flow or a Logic Apps flow. And these events can be initiated by user, or it can be scheduled, or it can be generated by connector, including a custom built trigger as well that we will see. So when it comes to the trigger, these are kind of triggers. So if you just open up any of your flow and start typing when, all of the things that you see under here are those triggers. So for example, when a task is completed, when a task is assigned to someone, when an item is created in SharePoint, all those kind of triggers. So we will see how we can create our own trigger and we can make it a part of Power Automate. Okay, so then there are two types of trigger as we discussed. So first one is polling trigger. So polling trigger, that means we do have a consumer, so which is trying to consume your services, and then we do have a system or service which will respond to those kind of an request coming from the consumer. So consumer wants to get some kind of an information from the system, and then system can reply back to that with the information that it has got. So in polling, what happens is usually consumers start by asking question to the system or service that is my data ready, and then the service can reply back, no, your data is not ready. For example, again consumer make another request to see if his data is ready with this system or service, again probably not yet ready. So consumer keep trying until his data is ready at a certain given time of interval. So again he will go and ask the system whether his data is ready, and yes, if the service or system thinks that the data is ready, it will get a response back that okay, the data is ready now and we can consume it. All right. So okay, I will ask everyone to be on mute, please. Okay. So and then if the data is ready, here we go. So polling, that means at a regular interval, consumer will keep polling the system or service, and whenever the data is ready, consumer can consume that. But this requires means this kind of an simple to implement, because only thing is that we need to keep polling at a regular interval, get the data back from the system or service whenever it is ready. But it is a kind of an time consuming, because we don't know when the data is ready. But probably we can implement some kind of a mechanism through which we will ask system to make us aware when the data is ready. So that there comes the second part, which is called as an webhook. So through webhooks, what can happen is that again we do have a consumer and we do have that system or service. So consumer will just let the system know that whenever the data is ready, just notify me and I will start consuming the data. And what service will do is whenever the data is ready, it will just notify the customer that, okay, hey, your data is ready, go and consume that. So this is the basic difference between polling and webhooks. And then we are going to see how we'll be able to create those triggers in Power Automate for our custom connectors by implementing both these techniques, polling as well as webhooks. Okay, so let us go into the webhook first, because it is very much effective to use, but at the same time, bit difficult to implement. So again, to start with, these webhooks are very much popular HTTP-based implementation of publisher, subscriber, or pops up kind of an notification pattern. So it provides a way for notification to be delivered to external service, that is subscriber, whenever a certain event occurs within that particular system, which is a publisher. So what happens in this case is, let's start from the publisher, from this place. So this publisher provides a subscription registration endpoint, which is this endpoint that you can see, this orange bar. And then the subscriber, which could be a Power Automate or a Logic app, that calls the subscription registration endpoint by creating or updating the trigger. So this is the first thing that can happen for in this pops up kind of an thing. Then the publisher can specify the notification contract, that is the what object to be passed with each notification. And then again, it must include that 201 kind of a response to proceed. Then the subscriber will provide the URL of the automatically generated endpoint that will be accepted as the notification messages. And then the communication will be done. And whenever the data will be ready with the publisher, that data will be sent from the publisher via the registered endpoint onto the subscriber. Then subscriber will go ahead, consume that particular data. And when the subscriber is done with consuming the data, it will go ahead and delete that trigger endpoint. And then we have all the data with the subscriber can consume. And this is how simply the webhook trigger kind of an functionality works. All right, so with that, let's see, let's get into the demo and see like how this kind of things works usually. So for that, let me get into my demo environment. So right now, the service that I'm going to consume is available directly from Microsoft at this URL called as contosoinvoicing.azurewebsites.net. So this is the kind of an API available. All of the API documentation is available here, as well as the API definition file is available. So again, this one is a Swagger UI, which gives information about all of the endpoints available, like add invoice, get invoice schema, list invoice, pay invoice, and many other things. And for example, this is the Swagger JSON. For example, if you directly want to get it imported for creating a custom connector, we can use this. So by using this Swagger JSON, I already have created the custom connector, and only thing now that we are going to create a trigger on top of that custom connector. All right. So, and again, to get authenticated to that, we do have this API key. So this is the API key that will be generated every time whenever you will visit this page. But for a connector to work with, we will keep continuously using this particular API key. Okay, so with that, what I will do is I'm at the make.powerapps.com portal, which is the or sorry, flow.microsoft.com, which is the flow portal. And I will simply go to the solutions where I have already created one solution by importing this custom trigger based on this Swagger file, okay, or the open API file. So let me just open it up. So I have various solutions available, out of which this is the one that I'm using for the triggers. So okay, let it open. So this is the trigger that we have got. And then again, for example, if I get into this trigger, you will be able to see that this is the basic information that we have got. In the description, we do have test um, API available as well as the production API available. For example, if you just want to test it out, you can just use this version, or directly you can use contoso-invoicing.azurewebsites.net kind of a thing. Let me just go ahead and edit this custom connector which is being created by importing that Swagger file. So this is the custom connector which has got a custom logo applied. Even the icon background has been specified. In the description, you can specify anything. Just for me to easily understand my endpoint, I have my description specified here. And then in the schema, we can either specify HTTPS or HTTP. Since this particular service is consuming the HTTPS endpoint, we have selected HTTPS, and this is not on-premises data gateway, so we have not selected this option. And then the host here is contosoinvoicing.azurewebsite.net, which is the website I just shown you. And then we have this base URL being implemented here, which is just /. So what we can do now is that we do have fewer definitions here. So for example, if I go to the definition, these are all of the definitions that we have got, which we just saw from this part. Sorry, the Swagger part, which I just have closed. So we do have various actions available like add invoice, get invoice, remove invoice, list invoices, and all those things. And then simply, for example, now if you want to test this kind of a trigger, what you can do is you can just go into the test. You can create a new connection here. So I already had got few connections, but I can quickly show you how you can still create a new one. And here you can specify your API key. So throughout this demo, we are going to use this API key. So I just have noted it down. Let me just use that. We will click create connection. So our new connection should be ready. And this was the previous one. Let me just refresh all of the connections that I have got. And then the one which was created today, it is here, like 30th of April. So this is the new connection that we have created now. And now that, for example, if you want to test out this connection, what we can do is we can simply click list invoices, and then we can click on test operation. So if the response is okay, if it is 200, we'll be able to see all of the invoices. So these are all of the invoices that we have got. List of invoices, which includes properties for each of the invoice, for example, invoice ID, date, created date, amount, etc., etc. Now that let us see how we'll be able to create the triggers for that. So in order to create those triggers or that webhook trigger specifically, we will have to go to the definition part. And here we do have a section for creating a trigger. So here we can just click new trigger to get started creating our trigger definition. So in the summary, I will just type when invoice is created. Probably for the description, we will have the same thing. And then invoice, sorry, the operation ID should be a unique one for this particular definition. So we will just have it as invoice created. So this one should be unique. Then again, for the visibility, probably we will not care. Let us go ahead with none that we have selected. And then here we have an option to specify the trigger type. So it could be a webhook or it could be a polling. So since we are exploring the webhook, we will select this type as the trigger type as the webhook. And then below that, we do have this request section, like how we want to define our HTTP request that will be used to create as well as register this webhook. So we'll just go ahead and import this one from the sample. And then again, all of these requests, which we just saw how the webhook gets registered, are the post verbs. So we'll just select that post. And then all of these things are available onto this website, which is contosoinvoicing.azurewebsites.net. So we will go ahead and use that endpoint itself. So which is contoso-invoicing.azurewebsite.net. And then I know that in the definition, for example, if you could have seen, we have a definition for creating a new invoice notification, right? So I will just invoke that new invoice notification, and then we will go ahead from here. So in the body, we will have to specify like what kind of an output that we will get. And for example, if you execute this, you will be able to see that, but just from the time constraint point of view, I already have it noted down, so I will just use it. So whenever you will post this kind of a thing in the body, you will get this kind of a response. So what we will do, we will just click on import so that this definition will be imported here. And then again, we have some kind of an uh, warning here that the combination of path and the method must be unique because as we discussed, this combination should be unique. So now that we have this particular combination being used twice, because we have new invoice register being used somewhere else, and then again we do have invoice created which is again pointing to the same thing. So just to be safe, what I can do is since that one was new invoice register, I will just simply go ahead and remove that endpoint from here. So whenever we will create policy templates, we'll see how to get across this kind of an issues, but only to make that endpoint unique for our custom connector, it has to be used only once. Okay, so now that with that, let me again come back to my trigger, which is invoice created. So now that you can see that at least that error has gone, we are pointing to the unique URL, which is new invoice notification from our trigger definition. So the next thing here is that we need to just scroll to this trigger configurations that we have. So these are kind of an callback URL parameters. So we just have to select the parameters that should receive the callback URL value. And in that case, we will select this target URL, which we had defined in our body of this. Okay. So we have selected that, and this selection will allow target URL to be populated at runtime by the custom connector. So now that again, let us go back to the response section. And now that you can see that we have some kind of an warning or error icon here, um, because we need to configure this. So let us go ahead, edit this body section, and then what we will have to do is we will have to mark this one as a required, because this one should be required, and the visibility for this should be internal. Otherwise, we won't be able to use this target URL with us. Okay. Oh, sorry. So again, probably body. Oh, let me just go back here. Let me just do it one more time. So I have again edited this body. Okay, and the error here is for the target URL, because the target URL needs to be a required, and then at the same time this target URL should have the internal visibility, which is the default value that needs to be specified. So for that, we will go ahead into the edit mode of target URL. We will make it as a required, and then the visibility is internal itself. So now that the validation is succeeded, we will come back to the body section, and we have no errors right now because target URL is now a required field. At the same time, the visibility for it has been set to the internal. So we'll again go back to our body section. So now that we have all those things specified, just that we will have a look at the web response or the webhook response that we have got. And here we just have to enter the invoice for the description and all those things. So for that purpose, what we can do is we do have this webhook response. We will click on import from a sample. So this is the response that we will get whenever we will create that endpoint, and now that endpoints want to return some kind of a response to the consumer. So for this description here, probably I will just type invoice. You can type it anything because this is just the response that we are going to get. And then we will click on import from sample. Again, for example, if you remember like what kind of an responses we were getting when the new invoice was created. It was kind of an array of invoices which included invoice ID, date, amount, etc. So I just had copied one of the response from there, which is this, and then I will just pass it on to the body. Once we do that, we can just simply go ahead and import that particular response, and we can just go ahead and update the connector. So now that only thing is like, mm, okay, here we have some kind of an issue which is saying that list webhooks is missing the notification URL. Okay, let me just check. All right. New registration. Okay. Okay. So just to go, miss, just to remove that, probably I will just delete that action itself. I don't want to look into the action, because only thing now that we are concentrating on onto getting this thing. Still, we have some error like the webbook operation. This book is missing notification URL property. Let me just check here if we are missing anything from our trigger definition, because I have some actions which are missing some kind of a definitions. So let me just check it. Okay, so this one is about list webhooks. Okay, let me just remove that action as well, because there are few actions, as I said, I was working on and then I was having some issues. But okay, so that wasn't the issue with the trigger that we are trying to define onto the custom connector. So as in the custom connector, you can have various triggers, and then again you can have various actions. So there were few actions which I was working on and then they were giving the issues, so I just have removed that to save the time. So now that we have our custom connector with the trigger definition ready, which should notify whenever the invoice is created. So now that we have updated this connector, what we will do is we'll just need to go ahead and test this. So for that purpose, again, let us go back to the make dot, sorry, not make dot, flow dot microsoft.com to go ahead and test this kind of an connector. So what will happen now is that whenever the invoice is created into the system, which is Contoso invoicing system, it should give us the response back to the consumer that, okay, there is one new invoice that got created. So for that purpose, what we will do is I will just click create for the Power Automate. And then simply we are going to create the cloud flow. And then what we will do is probably that could be a manually triggered flow. I will give it a name as create invoice. So this is the flow that will help us to create the invoices. So we'll go ahead, manually triggered, and then here we will go ahead and add the input, because for each of the invoice that we create, it needs some kind of an input. And then that input we will just select as a number. And for the text here, we will just specify it amount, because what kind of an amount that we want to specify for that invoice. And what we can do now is that we will go ahead, click new step, and under the custom, we have our custom invoicing triggers available. And then at the same time, we have the Contoso invoicing available as well. So I will just go ahead and select this one. The next thing here is that I just want to add invoice into our system with the amount which was given by the user manually. So I will go ahead and select add invoice here in the action. And here we'll be able to specify all those things. So what I will do is in the amount, I will go ahead and select the amount which was specified by that user. And then simply we will save this. So now that we have our flow ready, which will just create the invoice, which will help us to create the invoice. And then we are going to use this flow in both the situations whenever the flow or the invoice is being created for the both type of triggers. Next thing that what we will do is probably we will go ahead and create another flow which which is kind of a consumer flow. So whenever the new invoice is created, that will help us to get the trigger from that, and then it will process that particular flow. So what I will do is probably I will have both the flows open side by side so that we'll be able to execute and see them in execution side by side. So again, let me go to the flow.microsoft.com. So this new flow is kind of an consumer flow, which is going to consume the trigger of a flow has been created or the invoice has been created. So for that, again, I will go into the new flow, and then again I will select the cloud flow again. So what I will do is I will just skip this part and then let us go directly here. So this is the flow that I will name is as invoice notification. And this again here, what we'll do is we'll go into the custom tab, because now that we want to get notified whenever that invoice has been generated. So again, I will select this Contoso invoicing triggers, which is our custom connector. And then this one has got this event invoice is created kind of an trigger that we just had created. So I will select that, and then miss at least we will not do anything here. If you want, you can just go on and then try to use that particular invoice information. So let's say if you just want to use that information, so I will go ahead and use this compose, and then simply in the input we will collect the information about that particular invoice which was created. So probably we will just consume this amount, because when we will create the invoice, amount is the only required field that we are specifying. We are not specifying anything else. So let me just save that. And now that we have our both the flows ready, so let us see, like what we can do is we will go ahead and click on test this, and I will r- trigger it to run manually, so that this flow will get a trigger notification whenever there will be invoice that gets created in the system. So let us go ahead, click test here for the flow, which is going to help us for creating the invoice. We'll click on test on one more time. This is the kind of an trigger that we have got, or the connection that we have got. If you want to change that, even you can go ahead and change. So I will just use this. I will just specify 3000 as the amount. We'll click on run flow, and this flow should trigger, and then it should add one invoice into the system. Okay, so this flow has run successfully. Let us come back to this flow. Okay, so this flow has created an invoice with the amount which was specified by us, which is a 3000. And this was the flow, which was the invoice notification flow. So this one gets the notification whenever there was invoice being created. So you can see that the invoice ID generated is 2000, and this is the amount 3000 which we had given to the invoice creation flow. And again, we will be able to use that information in our flow. So only thing here is that this kind of a triggers will help us to get the notification whenever there is a trigger in the system. So we just saw that whenever the invoice is getting created, it will create a webhook, and then that webhook will notify us whenever that particular action has been triggered, which is add invoice, and then we'll be able to consume that in our flows. Okay, so that was pretty much simple. So all these webhooks are very much popular than polling trigger, because this gives us very much flexibility through which we'll be able to use them effectively. So quickly, let's see the other type of trigger, which is a polling trigger. So polling trigger is implementation that regularly calls your REST API service and checks for the new data. So if there is a new data, it will get that data. So after the platform has determined that new data is available, the trigger will fire and it will pass the newly collected data to the cloud flow or the logic app flow. So the polling trigger starts by retrieving the data and setting the state, and then it will periodically check for the updates by requesting all of the data since the last state was updated. So after the new data has been received, new state is set and the process will continue, and the API needs to be able to return the data incrementally based on the parameter value which is being specified. So at least you should have one thing in common. Probably it could be any kind of a date. So after that date, you want to get all of the invoices or all of the records which are updated from your previous call. So that one parameter you will have to specify as the parameter that you want to check for the updation, because this is a polling trigger. You will have to keep track of what kind of an information you need based on what kind of an information you had requested in the past. So you will have to use that kind of an parameter which will help us doing that. So it could be a date. For example, I want to get all of the, so let's say today at 30th of April, we requested some data at 12:18 p.m. right now. And then now that, let's say after 2 hours, I want to get that, get the incremental data by calling the polling trigger. In that case, I will use that date as the 30th of April 2022, let's say 2 p.m. And then I will get the data between that range, which was the delta data for me. Or for example, if you can also do a polling trigger based on, let's say now that I have got all of the invoices which were created for the invoice number 1000, and I want to return all of the invoices after 1000. So I will just pass on 1001 and I will be able to get the data after that. So it is our responsibility to get the information that we want, because this is a polling trigger. So let us see how we'll be able to implement the polling trigger. Okay. So for that, let me again go back to my environment. Let me just close down the flows which we don't want. We will use this create invoice flow because we will not again recreate that flow. So I will just have it here because again, whenever we will create an invoice, there will be invoice that will be created, and then we'll be polling this invoice to see if that invoice is created, and we'll get that information. All right, so what I will do is again, I will go back here. I will go back into these solutions, and then I do have another solution created here for that purpose, which is the trigger solution. So I will go into that trigger solution, and this is the same solution that we have seen. Now that we just want to go ahead and create another trigger here. So for that, let me go ahead and edit this custom connector. Let us go back into the definition, and then we will go ahead and create another trigger. So this was the trigger that we had created for the webhook. Now that we are going to create another trigger for polling. So in the summary, we will specify when invoice is created, and because the names are same, I will just suffix that with poll. Description, probably I will have it same thing, and then operation ID, it has to be unique. So I will just say invoice created, and just I will suffix that with poll. Rest of the other things we will keep as it is. For the visibility, it will be still none, and then the trigger type in this case we will select as a polling. So then next thing is that what we will do is again we will go into the request part. We will click on import from sample, and then we will select now get, because now that we want to get the data from the parameter which we want to specify. Okay, because it won't be post in this case, because we are going to poll our service, and then we want to get the information which we have, which we want to retrieve after our previous call. So for that purpose, again I will use the same endpoint. Okay, sorry, where it was. Yeah, again, I will use the same endpoint, but in this case, now that I want to get all the invoices, so for that, I will use list invoices. So this is nothing but the trigger or the action that we have got. We have this list invoices, so I'm going to just invoke that list invoices. And again, if you remember the invoices definition, we had got multiple things there. For example, invoice ID, date, creation date, from date, and all those things. So now that I just want to specify that I want to get all of the invoices from my parameter, which is a customly defined parameter, which is from date. So I want to get those invoices from a date which I will specify into this kind of a trigger. So what we will do now that we have this, and then we will I will go ahead here. I don't have to specify anything directly for the body as such because we already have it. Or again, if you want, we can specify the specific body that we will get. We will get from here. Okay. So for that purpose, what we will do is just get me. Oh, sorry. Give me just one moment. Okay. Right. So now that we have this gate here, we will just do the import. And now that we have our request ready, so what now that we will do is we will just import, or we will just edit this from date, because here we just want to specify how we want to retrieve all those kind of a thing. So again, we will not specify this as a required because we just want to get the data. So for the first request that we will make, probably we will not pass on the from date. So for that purpose, we will not make it required. But from the next request onwards, we will specify this from date, and only that chunk of data will be able to get. So here we will just use this as a not required, but in the visibility we will keep it internal because we don't want anyone to tweak this parameter, because this one will be used internally. Okay, so for that purpose we will keep it internal, and the required is no. Okay, so next thing that we can do is now that we have specified our request, now that we will get some kind of a response again back from our uh, poll. So we will add that particular response by clicking add default response, and then this is the body where we'll have to specify all those responses. So again, this is the same response that we could get from all those invoices which will have invoice ID, date, and everything. So this one will be an array of invoices which will have information about each of the invoice that we will get. So we will just specify all that information, and then simply we are going to import this. Okay, so now that we have all this information with us, now that another thing that we'll have to do is configure our trigger. So for that purpose, we will go into the trigger configuration, and then we just have to specify what kind of a thing that we are trying to monitor for the state change. Because as I said, probably you can do that from a date, from an invoice ID, or anything that you want. So in our case, we choose to get it from a date. So we'll just select that query parameter as a from date. And then again, we just need to specify the value to be passed here to select that query parameter. So we can use that expressions. So again, while we are doing the policy things, we will see that expression. But again, if I again go back here, so you can see here that this is the body that we will receive for all the invoices. So in this case, you can see that we have all of the invoices being written as an array, and in that array we will get one or more invoices. So that means the trigger body will contain all of the invoices, and just that we want to get the created date, or which kind of an parameter that we are looking out from here. So in this case, this one will be the created date, because as I said, this it is up to us which kind of an logic we want to do. Because let's say, for example, if you want to create it based on the invoice ID, even you can do that. So all of the invoices after uh, 1933 you will be able to get, but we are just concentrating onto the date, because that way we'll be able to get the all the invoices being created from that particular date. Then the next thing is that we can do that we can just select the collection that contains all of the data that we have got. And then this is the invoices which will be written by that collection, because all of those things will be available in all the invoices as a body there. If you want to specify any of the trigger hint here for the users who are going to use your trigger, you can do that, because this is just the custom connector. But for example, if you want to show this kind of an hint to the end users who are going to use your trigger in Power Automate, you can specify that here. But now that what we will do simply is we will just update this connector, which is our um, which contains our trigger for the polling. And once it is done, we will again test out this trigger by implementing another cloud flow. Okay, so this was the polling trigger, and we choose to poll this information on a from date. Okay, so now that this connector is updated with the definition. So we already, okay, let me just go back here. Okay, so we already have this flow, which will help us for creating the invoice. Let me just go back. So what we will do is we will create another flow which will help us to test the trigger or which will poll this particular create invoice for a longer time, and then it will give it will take the values from there. So for that, again, I will go to flow.microsoft.com, and from there we will again click on create, and probably again we can in this case we will just have to again create a cloud flow. So we'll just go ahead, create a cloud flow. Oh, sorry, means at least this case, firstly, we should have one kind of a flow ready through which we'll be able to get all of the information about all of the invoices that we have here. Okay. The next flow that probably we will create is about consuming that entire information. So we will click that cloud flow. I will just keep this for a time being, and then I will just enter the description for this as a invoice notification um, with poll. Okay, so this is the name that we have got, and then again I will just click on to the custom tab here. So here we do have custom connector available, and then okay, looks like our flow, our trigger is not yet here. Let me check if I have updated my trigger. So let me just do that one more time if I have not. Okay, because ideally if that trigger has been done, we should be able to see the other trigger there as well, which is when invoice is created. Let me just do that one more time quickly. I'm just updating the connector one more time. So again, I just found that probably it might take 2 to 3 minutes to update that connector and for you to see all of the newly created triggers there. So for that purpose, let me again go back to the create. Let us refresh this one more time. Let me just do a quick refresh, and then let us create another flow here. Let us skip this. Firstly, let us directly go there and check if that flow is available. Okay, it is still not here. Okay, maybe something wrong. Ah. Okay, sorry. So I think I mistakenly have updated the other connector where there was only one trigger definition. So let me go ahead and update this connector one more time. We should have a definition of both webhook as well as the polling trigger. Let us go ahead. Let us update this, because until and unless we see the other connector here, we won't be able to proceed. So for that, let me again go back to the create. Let me refresh it one more time. And here I will just click on Cloudflow, probably skip from here. Let us go into the custom here. Okay, still we don't have, but okay, Miss Atis, looks like the demo doesn't work. But whenever you will create a new definition for the trigger, you should be able to see that definition here, and then you will be able to proceed from there. But with that, let me just quickly check if I will be able to do it from the solution itself. So if I go into the solution, try to create a flow from here, let me check if that works, because sometimes it takes some time to get this work onto the general level of flow, but sometimes from the flows which are created within that solution, it does work. So let me just go ahead, create a cloud flow, and this one with automated, because now that we want to get it triggered whenever there is an action. So let me just skip this again. We will select the custom here. Let me select this one. Okay, we still don't have it, but probably I will just skip this demo. But whenever you will define your trigger, you should be able to see when the invoice is created with the poll which we had selected. Let me just try it one more time. If in case it doesn't work, we will proceed. But whenever you are done with your custom connector, whenever you have defined the trigger on top of it, you should be able to see those trigger onto the flow. So let us go into the definition one more time. And yeah, here we do have those two triggers. Let me just check the name of those. Okay, so ideally we should have been able to see the poll trigger here when invoice is created with poll, but we cannot see it yet. Let me just do it one more time. Yeah, we are in the same environment that I just have checked. So the last time we will check, otherwise we will move to the next demo part. Okay. Or Siddharth or Kunj, if you have any clue, just let me know. Okay, so let me just go back. Let me just refresh it one more time. Again, for example, if I get back into my solution, try to create another flow. If that trigger is available, we will be able to continue with that. So let us go back into the flows, try to create a new flow, automated kind of an flow. I will just skip this part so that we can move to the custom area. I will select this custom invoicing triggers that we have got. Oh yeah, good. So now that we have at least this poll being available here. So I will just click on this poll, and now that we will be just polling our invoice being created. And from here, again, I will select this invoice created, and then again, we'll be able to see all of those invoices. So for example, we can just use the listing of invoices, but probably just to keep it simple, I will just use the compose just to save the time. So or otherwise we can use the list invoices so that we'll be able to see all of the invoices which are listed after that. So when the invoice is created, we will just go ahead and select the amount from that. And then let me just save this. Okay. So while it is saving, okay, let it save otherwise. Okay, so meanwhile, I will just prepare the other flow that we have for creating the invoice. So what I will do is I will create 2 or 3 invoices. And when this flow is done saving, we will even trigger this flow. Okay, so we'll just test this flow manually itself so that now that it is running, so that it is ready for polling kind of an information. So I will go here again, which is the create invoice flow, which we created at the first time. I will go ahead, click test for this flow. I will go ahead manually there, and then we will specify few of the values for amount. So let's say here I will select 5,000 as the amount. We will run this. While it is running, again I will go back. Again we will run this flow. We'll create multiple invoices. So this one is with 1,700. So now that we have created at least 2 invoices, let us go ahead, do one more because we do have budget, so we can keep shopping today. So this amount is 3,000. So now that you can see that we have at least 3 flows that we have triggered in last 30 seconds. And now we will again go back to our flow. So this flow is still running, but if I probably let this one run, and then if I open up that flow and if I go into the history of that flow, you can see that this particular flow was continuously triggering or continuously polling. At least it takes minimum 2 minutes for this flow to trigger, but when it is there, you will be able to see that it is polling continuously, and then step by step we will be able to get all of the information that we have specified in the from date. So next time onwards, the next from date will go there and we'll be able to see all. So let me just go ahead one more time and try to test it one more time by manually. Okay. So if it can get the information, but only thing when this kind of a flow will run from the flow run history, you will be able to notice that this particular flows will keep polling the information for if the invoice has been created for multiple times, and will be able to see multiple responses. So looks like it is taking some more time, but whenever you will create this kind of a flow, it is worth checking the flow history here. And definitely when this flow will run, we will be able to see that it has been run for a multiple time. So what we can do is we will let this flow running as it is, instead of spending our time looking at it, and then we will move to the next part. So for that purpose, I will just hand it over to Smita for covering the policy templates for custom connect.
Hello, all. Myself Smita Nachan. I am from Pune, India. I am a Microsoft MVP and MCT, and these are some of my social handlers by which you can get in touch with me. So now let's see this policy template for custom creator in a Power Automate. So the policies allows you to modify the behavior of a custom connector at a runtime. So you can use the policies to perform the data conversation, route requests, set parameter values, and many more things. So let us explore using a policies with custom connectors and configure them by using a policy templates. So let's see how to applying a policy. So applying a policy template to a custom connectors allows you to select a policy that you want to use from a list of templates, and each selected template will prompt you to fill out the necessary configuration for that policy. So when you complete the form, the policy is activated after you update the connector. So when you are applying a policy template, you can choose to have it apply to all the actions and the triggers or only for a specific ones. Now let's go and see some of the common policy use cases. So there are set host URL, set header, set query parameter. So let's go one by one. So when it's come to the set host URL, so by default, the host URL is hard coded into the connector configuration. A policy combined with the connection parameters allows the host URL to be specified every time you create a connection by using the connector. So for example, this use case could handle a dev, test and production version of the system API. So for the set header, you have to use to prompt the data from the connection parameters query or body of the request to the header. So commonly this process is done to accommodate APIs that want specific information configured in the header. So for example, this use case could be a correlation ID to track the full business process that is being performed. The last one is the set query parameter, so use for handling the default values and if necessary, but the marker does not configure one. So for example, if an API required a top parameter for how many records to return by using a policy, you could set a default value to be used in the maker does not configure one. So let's see these expressions to access the runtime values. So expressions enables policies templates parameters to get their values from runtime data. The functions can access and perform runtime data from the headers, query and body of the request and response from the API. So for example, if you have a list of invoices and you have to work with the response bodies, and let's say that this is the first one where you have a list of invoices and you have to get the all the invoices, then in that case you can go for the expression body dot invoices. It will give you a list of all the invoices. And the second one, if you want to check for this the zeroth level of the invoices, for example it is a 123, then you can say the body dot invoices of 0 dot invoices id, so it will give you invoice id at the zeroth position. Then the second one is the work with header values. So if you want to get the header values, then you can use the expression at the headers and the header name. The third one, if you want to work with the query values, then you have to use the expression at the query parameters and the query parameter name you have to pass. And when it's come to the work with the connection values, the expression you have to use the connection parameters and provide the connection parameter name. So now let's go to the demo. And in this demo, we will see how to use the policy template to dynamically set the host URL. So in this demo, we will create a policy template to set the host URL at the connection creation. And this process allows a connection to work with either test or the production. So Microsoft Power Platform CLI includes the
Okay, so the Microsoft Power Platform CLI has something called as PA-con or PA connection, which is a command line tool which will help for Microsoft Power Platform custom connector kind of a development. So there are prerequisites for this. Firstly, that you will have to install Python, and then second that you will have to run the command called as pip install pacon. So for that, let me just go back to my development environment. So if once you have installed the Python, you can just run this command pip install pacon. Okay, so these are the prerequisites to get this one done. So next thing that what we will do is we have connector created. So we will download that connector locally. So we can download that connector definition file locally, so that we will be able to modify probably the host URL property, and then again we will upload that. So for that, let me firstly go back to the connector itself. So again, let me go back to the solutions, and in this solutions, I'm into my environment, and in this solution we have got one solution for the policy templates. Let me just close down the other part. You don't need. Okay. Okay. All right. Looks like I don't have it. Uh, um, okay, so looks like this one doesn't have. Just give me one moment. Probably I will have to upload this one. So just a moment. Um, I must have it in my downloads folder somewhere. So this is the custom connector that we had built, and then what we'll do is we will just take it and start using that, because we can just extend the definition of that custom connector, and then we will add the host parameter, host URL as the extra parameter there, so that whenever we want to use that connector, that value will be populated and we'll be able to use it. Okay, I think I copied the wrong file here. Um, Sorry, where it was. Okay, so I will copy this one, policy templates. All right, okay. So let me go ahead, probably let me just delete this one first, and then I will just import that solution which has got a custom connector already ready, which is a simple plain custom connector again on the definition of the Contoso invoicing itself. So we are into the solutions. I will go ahead, click browse, and then we will go into the importing of that solution. Click next, and then this should help us to get that connector in our environment. So we'll just click on import. Should be very quick to get that solution imported. All right. Okay, meanwhile it is doing, let us check, go back to the previous flow, and if let us see if that the polling was working there. Okay. Okay, so looks like it is still not. Okay, still not, but okay. But whenever you will have that part, you should be able to see that working. Okay, it is still importing this solution. So once this solution is imported, what we will do is we will publish all those customizations. And now that this, okay, so this one is imported now, I will just go ahead and publish all of the customizations, so that all those customizations are ready, and then we'll be able to use all of the triggers as well as all of the connectors that we have got in that particular solution. So now that this particular solution, which contains our custom connector, is in the cloud, so with the Microsoft Power Platform CLI, which we have, which is a command line tool, we will download that connector onto the local system, and then we will make changes to the property definition of it to include few of the more values into the host URL property, and then from there we'll be able to make those edits, and then we will re-upload all those customizations to the cloud in this particular solution, so that whenever someone will create a new connector based on our definition, they will be able to see those values being pre-populated already. Okay, so now that we have these Contoso inversing policy templates available, and inside that we should have one custom connector, which is this one. So let me just go ahead and click on edit. So this is the custom connector that we have got here. what we will do first is, for example, if I go into the test and then if I try to create a new connection, just want miss we will not create a new connection, but just I want to pay your attention that right now this is only asking for API key. Okay, so we will make modifications to this custom connector, and then we will have few more things being added here. So for that, let me again go back to the solutions and then select that solution. But okay, now that first we will download this connector locally by running something called as PACon download. That will help us to download this custom connector down, onto the local system, and then we can make a changes onto that. So before we even run that PACon download, we will just have to get authenticated first. So we will run PACon login. And since this one is a Microsoft Power Platform CLI, it will help us to get authenticated by this method. So we can just copy that URL, paste it in the uh, browser, and then we will have some code. We can just give that code. Again, for example, if you have used CLI for Microsoft 365, it is the same kind of an method with which they authenticate. So we'll go ahead, get ourselves authenticated. So now that we are connected to the Power Platform connector, so the next thing is that we want to download all those connectors. So or the specific connector that we want. So we will just run this command pacon download, and then this one will first ask us for which environment we have, from where we want to download. And since this one is under my environment, I will go ahead and give that choice, which is the first one. And then this one will select that environment. It will list out all of the connectors that we have got there. And then the third one is the solution that we have got, or the connector that we have got, which we want to update. So we'll go ahead and select that. Okay, and then what it will do is it will just download everything into a folder, which is this particular folder here, and you can see everything is here. So this one contains various files for the API definition, API properties, icon, and then few of the settings for that particular connection. So what we will do is we will edit this API properties.json, which we have got, which contains the configuration about the connection parameters or the other parameters that we have seen previously. So when the property is configured, user who are creating any kind of a connection will be prompted for this value along with the API key that we have seen. So what we will do is we will use some kind of a JSON that we already have it here, which is the host URL. So now that, for example, if you have seen, whenever we were wanted to use this custom connected, it has only prompted us to specify the API key. But now that along with that, we want us to also prompt for the host URL. So for that purpose, we have this host URL being specified here. So let me just format it quickly, which is of type string. And then again, we are specifying some kind of a description, display name tooltip, and this one is a required field, so that along with the API key, it will also prompt us for providing the host URL. So now that we have done with this change, what we will do again is that we want to get this change uploaded back to our configuration in the cloud, which is onto the connector. So for that, we will run the command called as pacon update, specifying the API definition that we just have changed. So the API definition is in the file. Oh, sorry. Before that, I will have to go into that directory. Yeah, this is the directory that we have got. So again, here we will run that command to get the API definition updated. So we will run the command pacon update hyphen API def, and then all of our definition is in the Swagger file. So I just have put a tab here and it has detected that Swagger file. And then again, we have all of the API properties being defined into the other file, which is the API properties.json file. And then again, we do have our icon being specified into the icon file, which is the icon.jpg. Okay, so this is the commandlet which is available, a standard commandlet which will help you to update your connector definition. Okay, so we will go ahead, run this command, and then again we will have to specify where we want to get it updated. So I will just specify my environment here. So this environment is selected, and the connector that we want to update. So this is the connector that we want to update at third point. Okay, looks like some kind of an error. So cannot find member host. Okay, let me just check what has gone wrong here. Sorry. Okay, okay, everything seems to be fine. Let me just run this command one more time. Probably some issue with the command itself. Let me just select the environment, select the definition one more time. No, seems to be some issue with the host URL that I had tried to specify here. So in the properties itself, we have this. Sorry, only thing is like what was missing is that this should not be directly under the properties, because since this one is going to be a part of connection parameter that we want to include, I should have added under the just above the API key, because along with the API key we want user to also pass the host URL. So this should not be a directly part of properties, but this one should be a part of connection parameter. All right. So what I will do is I will again run this command so that we'll be able to update that definition. We will select the environment, and then we will select the connector which we want to update. And now that this should work. Okay, right. So since this is taking time, I have my fingers crossed. So hopefully this should do. Okay. Okay, so now that we can see that this one has been updated. So next thing is that we also need to add the set host name policy. So what we will do is we will configure the set host name policy template to use the connection property that we have configured in the in this particular step. So for that purpose, what we will do is we will again go back to our solution that we had created, where we have our policy templates. So I will go back to that solution and then simply, okay, let it load. And then let me just edit this particular template that we have created. We will go into the definition part of it, and then here we'll have to specify that policy. So we are here, and then I will just click on new policy. So now that we are in the new policy section, and here we just have to specify the prop kind of a policy that we want to see here. So we will just specify it as a host URL policy, and then we want to use the template which is for setting a host URL. Okay, so that thing we will have selected. So again, that since this one is coming from the connections parameter, we'll have to get it updated there. So what we will do is here we'll have to select the URL template that we have as the @connection params specified by the host URL that we have asked it to use. So this is the host URL that we have, because now that we want this particular URI template to be used for setting the host URL. Okay, so for that reason we have it selected. We will go ahead and update this particular connector, and then that's it. So now that we have updated our connector, as well as we have also defined a custom policy onto our connector. So now that whenever we will go ahead and try to test this particular connection, so let us go to the test and let us go into the new connection. So here we will be able to see that we also have been asked for specifying the API URL along with the key. So probably what we can do here is that we can again specify the same Contoso thing here. So let me just check if I have that URL ready with me. So I will just go ahead, use that URL here, And then API key, again, we'll have to use that API key. If I have got that, let me just check. Okay, yeah, I can use this API key, which we had it there, okay, from the previous section. So let me again go back, and then I will just use that API key, and then we will just go ahead and create our connection. So once we are done with creating our connection, what we can do is again we can go back there and then refresh this page. Let us see if we have that policy available. So which is here. And what we will do is we will simply go ahead and test this with list invoice, and then we'll go ahead, simply click on test operation, and then if that connection is successful, we should be able to get everything as a 200 okay, and we are able to see all the invoices. So this is how, for example, if you want to pass on additional information along with the out of the box headers or maybe other parts, we will be able to do that by using the PA cons kind of and things. So with that, we are to the close of our session, and thank you very much for attending us.